Yemen has further split, with Aden under the control of southern separatists. The internationally recognized government is confined to the presidential palace. So how does that complicate the Saudi-led war against Houthi rebels? And is Yemen on the way to inevitable partition? This is Inside Story. Hello there and a warm welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. Yemen appears on the verge of disintegration, with three major factions now battling over the fate of the country. The internationally recognised government has been forced from its headquarters in Aden by separatists seeking to carve out their own state in the south. Fighting broke out after the government ignored a separatist demand that the Prime Minister and his cabinet be dismissed. Prime Minister Ahmed Obeid bin Dagar was widely blamed for food shortages in the region. It's a major blow to President Rabu Mansour Hadi, who's already battling Houthi rebels in the north. It also signals divisions in the Saudi-led coalition, whose support is essential to Hadi's war effort. The Saudis back Hadi, but their allies, the United Arab Emirates, have thrown their weight behind the southern separatists. It's complicated. Yemen is deeply divided, with several groups fighting for control. Houthi rebels have been battling the government for years. In 2014, they took control of the capital Sana'a in the country's north. The internationally recognised government is backed by the air power of the Saudi-led coalition, and up until this week, it ruled from the port city of Aden. But that's now in the hands of a third faction, southern separatists supported by the United Arab Emirates. South Yemen was an independent country until 1990, and nationalist sentiment there remains strong. Al-Qaeda and other armed groups are also active in the region, holding pockets of territory in the north and the south. So let's take a closer look at the separatists. Well, they're loyal to the Southern Transitional Council, or STC, and want the restoration of an independent south. The STC was formed in May last year by a former governor of Aden, Idris al-Zubaydi, had been ousted by the Hadi government over accusations of disloyalty. Until recently, the government and the STC had been united against a common enemy, the Houthi rebels. But the battle over Aden represents a new split in the already fractured country. Well, here to help us make sense of all of this are our guests. In London, Baraa Shiban, the Yemen project coordinator for the international human rights group Reprieve, also a former member of Yemen's National Dialogue from 2012 to 2014. And from Washington, D.C., Nabeel Khoury, a former Deputy Chief of Mission with the US Embassy in Yemen. A very warm welcome to both of you. Baraa, we've got the Prime Minister and his government holed up in the presidential palace. At this stage, do you see it likely that they're actually going to leave the city of Aden?
I don't think so. I was in touch with them earlier today and yesterday. They confirmed again that they're not leaving Aden. What seems to be the situation right now is that they are still in the government's, you could say, presidential palace. They are confined to two districts amongst Aden, eight districts. And they're waiting to hear back from the president in Riyadh, who is currently meeting with primarily with the Saudis, and until then they're waiting to hear what's next. The situation is basically have been escalating since 2 years. Both groups, the presidential forces and the SDC forces, have overlapping control over the city, but actually not coordinating with each other. And efforts to merge them together have repeatedly failed. One group is backed by the UAE, and that's the SDC, and the other is backed and supported, of course, by Saudi Arabia. I think it was inevitable to happen, because simply you cannot have two forces controlling the same area and then eventually they will clash.
Okay, Nabeel, let's bring you in there, because I want to know why efforts to merge these two groups have failed. Why do the separatists now want to bring down the Hadi government?
Well, as Baraa said, there have been tensions between these two groups. It's a question of leadership. It's a question of taking control of an area. But frankly, I don't think either side can take full control. In the end, this is a failure on the part of Hadi. If there were any doubts remaining of his lack of competence and lack of leadership, these events should shed these doubts. He is a man of the South, and if in the South he cannot lead and he cannot appeal to people to be unified, then he cannot lead anywhere. And this fig leaf of legitimacy should now be totally removed.
Okay, I mean, but it was an uneasy alliance, wasn't it, Nabeel? Because Hadi might be a man of the South, but he wanted unity in Yemen, and that's diametrically opposed, of course, to what the Southern secessionists want.
I'm not sure that he really wants unity. I think he is content to stay in Riyadh and be well-fed and taken care of. He presides over a corrupt government. Since he supposedly was legitimately elected, he has brought nothing. He has contributed nothing to the country. He's been a disappointment to everybody, even to his closest supporters and advisors. He should just step aside. And frankly, I don't think, although on the surface this looks like a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and UAE, I think there is actually connivance between the two. The Saudis have not really lifted a finger to help their protege, Mr. Hadi, and I think they're probably in agreement with the UAE to let them start some kind of a statelet in the south that would be presided over by a puppet government led by Zubaydi.
Okay, I mean, that's a really interesting point, and I want to get on to the Saudi-UAE alliance in just a moment. Just before we do that, Baraa, I just want to pick up on what Nabeel was saying about Hadi. Do you agree that he's essentially checked out, that he's quite happy sitting there in Riyadh to let the South sort itself out on its own? Or do you think he's going to come to the Prime Minister's aid?
I mean, I partially agree and partially disagree. I think Hadi supports a federal system. The main issue is that why Hadi hasn't been able to return is basically there has been mounting challenges, including himself being prevented to enter the city of Aden in mid 2017 by the SCC, and to remove tensions, he decided to go to Riyadh until further discussions between the two groups conclude to something fruitful. And that didn't happen. So I do agree with him partially that he takes part of the blame, or even a huge part of the blame, for many of the events and his inability to lead in these, I think, crucial circumstances. However, in regards to his legitimacy, the main issue is that there is no other legitimate forces or a clear political process that can say, this is we are at point A with Hadi, and this is where we're going to go until point B. And until that happens, Hadi will remain a president. And it is a complicated situation unless we have a clear plan of how we're going to elect a new leadership of the country, similar to what happened in 2011 and 2012, when the GCC stepped in and provided at least somehow a clear map of a transitional process plan. That this is not the case right now. Right now, you have fighting in the north with the Houthis. You have tensions in the south, and you have almost 17 active front lines, where clashes are happening. So I think what's happened is even further complicates the situation, and doesn't help. If anyone wants to calling for Hadi to remove, what happened even complicates it further and doesn't help even for Hadi to be removed anytime soon.
Let's look at the UAE and Saudi and the sides that they're backing. But why is it that the Emirates has thrown its weight behind the southern separatists? I mean, it's been trying to recruit or pushing to recruit southern militias who are acting independently of the Saudi-backed forces for the best part of the last year. So why is it chosen that particular side?
I'm not sure why specifically did they choose that side, but the UAE have a lot of distrust to many of the members of the Islah Party, who are a very influential player in the current dynamics in Yemen. They're very close to Hadi and have decided to join the fight against the Houthis. Now, the UAE do share with them that goal, and with the Saudis as well. They do agree that they have all of them together are anti-Houthis, but the UAE, in addition, don't want a result where I think Islah will be a dominant player in the current in the future of Yemen. In the south, the SDC now is the most influential power. With the continuing support of the UAE, of course, that would weaken Islah and the other groups. However, the problem is that this approach is unsustainable. It doesn't help to whenever the government is close to bringing some stability to the ground. And earlier this month, in January, the Prime Minister announced the fiscal year's budget, which is for the first time since 3 years, and announced that the Parliament would meet to approve the budget. So it was trying to bring some order at the local level, very simple, basic order. These tensions arise. So I think at the long run, we are the continuation support of further and other groups outside of the state structure will definitely weaken the state.
Okay. Nabeel, given that you suggested the idea that Saudi and the UAE are in agreement here, would you then follow up that Saudi would support the STC and abandon Hadi and what is essentially the internationally recognized government of Yemen?
I think the Saudis are trying to find a face-saving way of dumping Hadi. Saudi leadership and the UAE's, for that matter, are both very opaque and hard to judge what their real intentions are. They certainly don't tell you that in their official pronouncements. But sometimes lack of action, lack of even verbal support tell you a lot. In a situation where Hadi is being totally excluded from the south and his government is holed up in a small area in the presidential palace in Aden, there has been very lukewarm support from Saudi. The spokesman even suggested that perhaps Hadi ought to listen to the demands of the South. Really? I mean, this is not something new. He should have been listening to them a long time ago. The UAE has thrown its military support behind Zubaydi. The Saudis have not. Of course, the Saudis don't have any soldiers in Yemen, but they do have mercenaries under their control, and these are not being mobilized to help the Hadi side. Therefore, and there is strong friendship between MBS and Mohammed bin Zayed in the UAE. And I doubt that they are working at cross purposes here. I think they are talking every day. And I think that the Saudis are probably going to eventually let a statelet in the south be formed and hope that they can press the war against the north and eventually establish a northern state that they can live with along their borders.
I mean, this is a country where allegiances shift all the time. But if we look back, the Saudis really pushed for the unity of Yemen back in 1990. So it would be quite a turnaround, wouldn't it, for them to now support the separatists. But perhaps they see that as the better option when they want to fight the Houthis in the north.
Yes, I mean, at this point, it's very hard to maintain unity in Yemen. Certainly, there hasn't emerged a Yemeni leader, a Nelson Mandela, let's say, who can really, through charisma and strong appeal, unite the people and keep them together. Lacking that, the Emirates and the Saudis are not able to influence Yemeni politics that much and certainly do not appeal across the board. I think, you know, in addition to Hadi's failure as a national leader, one has to say that the Arab coalition has failed, and the Saudi leadership, they have, after 3 years, of using all the mercenaries that money can buy, using the best military equipment that they bought from the US and the UK. That's all they have to show after 3 years is a divided country in chaos, cholera spreading, diphtheria, malnutrition. The country is in such a mess that if this is the new leadership that we expect in the Gulf and the Arab world, I must say we're in pretty bad shape.
Okay, because as you say, after 3 years of this fighting, if we look at the map that we saw a little earlier at the beginning of the program, we see that the Saudi forces, the Hadi forces, Saudi-led coalition, do control the vast majority of Yemen. But if you peel back that top layer, we'll find, won't we, Baraa, that it's actually controlled by a patchwork of tribes, such as the nature of Yemen. So one wonders, and perhaps one needs to ask, how strong those tribal loyalties are now to the Hadi government.
Well, I mean, for a long time, the forces who are fighting the Houthis shared one common goal. They are anti-Houthis. And many of them then joined for many different reasons. If you come to the southern movement, they want to push the Houthis because they see them as northerners who have invaded their land. If you talk about the tribal coalition in the north, they view them simply as people from outside, again, outside their immediate territory, and are pushing them out of their areas. So there are many different interests into why this coalition, let's say, came together. However, I think the problem is that there is a lack of, first of all, a clear political leadership from all spectrum and say this is our vision to Yemen moving forward. And since that's not the case, you leave a vacuum, and then that vacuum gets filled with many different other ideas and other plans. And then you have many groups who can say, like, I have my own plan and I can just push forward. For the SDC, they felt that with the current movement of Ahmed bin Dagher, the prime minister, he is trying to have more control over their areas. So he went to Abyan, he went to Lahab, and he was trying to mobilize support around the government. And the final thing is that when he called the parliament to actually held its sessions inside Aden, it was for them again a push they felt against their vision towards independence. It will make things further, I think, complicated. But again, when we talk about the humanitarian situation, we talk about a complication. We need a functioning state. The problem is that there is no clear political process by any of the people and in the international community who supported Yemen during the transition in this critical time of Yemen. Everyone seems to have felt like they have abandoned the country, and they're waiting for some miracle to happen.
Baraa, if I could just jump in there, because I know that you're talking about this clear vision. You were a member of the National Dialogue in the years between the uprising in 2011 and the start of the war. You were until 2014. Was that a missed opportunity to settle Southern secessionist demands, for one thing, to create this clear political vision that you're now saying the country so desperately needs?
Well, the National Dialogue did achieve what it was set for. So it did come out with a draft constitution. The problem is that once we were supposed to vote for our coming constitution, the Houthis staged a coup against the government and dragged, unfortunately, the entire country into a civil war. And until today, we're all hostage to that civil war. And this is quite the problem. I think the National Dialogue did bring out a clear vision into how Yemen should look like, a clear vision into how the federal system would work. How is the system with the balance of power between the regions and the central government? But it's only effective if we were able to get it through a referendum, and that's not the case. And the abandonment by the international community to back that process quite clearly and strongly, like they did from the years 2011 until 2014, makes things further complicated. It doesn't make things work. It didn't help when they're all waiting for some miracle to happen by Saudis or by the UAE and say, well, by the way, Hadi is weak. and the country is doomed.
Nabeel, as Baraa alluded to or mentioned earlier, this is the world's worst humanitarian crisis that we're seeing in Yemen due to this war. How is this new split, this new level of violence going to be affecting aid operations, which are already severely hampered in the country? I mean, this is a population that's already on its knees.
Well, again, I mean, I seem to be blaming everybody here. First, the failure of Hadi. Second, the failure of the Arab coalition and Saudi leadership. And now the UN and the world. The international community has let Yemen down, starting with the Trump administration here in the US. They have shown zero caring about the Yemeni people and their suffering. And if they had the slightest bit of concern, they would have pushed for a strong diplomatic solution. And believe me, with strong American backing and pressure on the Saudis, they could bring this war to an end, and they could go back to a negotiated solution. Now, look, you know, Baraa is part of a new, vibrant and very promising generation in Yemen. There are young Yemeni men and women who are leaders of civil society, who are leaders in the media, and who are spreading the word about what's going on in Yemen. They're doing a very good job. I commend them. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be their time yet to take over the reins of power in Yemen. The problem with the national dialogue at the time conducted by UN envoy Jamal bin Omar is that it was concerned with the constitution, with refinements, but there was no real power brokering arrangement to get everybody, the main leaders of those who counted, who had soldiers on the ground, to agree on how they were going to share power.
Okay.
Once you need that first, then you can come up with the most beautiful constitution you want, and you should promote the new generation in Yemen. But I'm afraid the time has not yet come, and we are looking at a few more years of bloodshed and suffering.
Baraa, would you agree with that we're a long way off from any sort of resolution here, and that the longer the war goes on, the more likely we are going to see the breakup of Yemen?
Well, I mean, I agree that I think we're not any time close to a solution, to a clear and sustainable solution. The conflict is still ongoing. But again, we cannot just wait and see and say that's the end of it. It was a similar situation. I would remind Mr. Nabeel in 2010, when everyone felt like Saleh is handing over power to his son, and the country is doomed, and there's nothing to do about it. It took initiative and took a lot of effort, and then the international community stepped in and strongly backed a clear process between 2012 and 2014. So I think the burden relies on the same groups who were able once to mobilize themselves in 2011 to come together and say, now this is the time to come together with a clear plan. The difference with Yemen that we have some sort of a plan, we have some sort of an idea how to move from the current situation to a federal system. We need to support the local system at the local level so they can support and having a functioning and law and order at a local level. And I think then in the future, if the Southerners were still unsatisfied, then they can have the right to a referendum. But from reaching from a point A until that time, we need a lot of work, and we need a strong commitment and strong work even by the international community.
Okay.
What seems to be happening
Baraa,
is that they are
do have to leave it there. Apologies for cutting into you. Do hope that the people who matter are listening and will take action on your advice. Many thanks to both of you for joining us today for a very interesting discussion indeed. Baraa Shiban and Nabeel Khoury. And thank you two very much for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. It's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, it's bye for now.